service thus far. I would like to, in honor of all the new babies, wish you a happy Children's Day. I want to wish you a happy Children's Day. Now, to you that may seem like, what? Happy Children's Day, what does that even mean? Well, I think, you know, in sight and in light of all these other holidays that we follow, we forget. Like we had Mother's Day and we had Father's Day, and we don't realize that Children's Day is right in the middle. Well, at least for certain countries it is. You see, in Argentina, they call it El Día del Niño. Buenos días, amigos latinos. And that happens the second Sunday in August. And the way they celebrate it is they give their kids gifts. The holiday in general is about honoring children. That's a good thing, right? They give kids gifts. Now, for me that sounds pretty good because I still call my mom Mommy. So I can still buy in a little bit of that. I've been in the store before and my mom's been all the way on the other side. And it's been that awkward moment where I want her attention but don't want to sound like I'm 12 years old. You know? Can we get the slide going? And so other countries were they celebrate it differently. For example, in China, it's on June 1st, and many schools take their children on field trips, or they have concerts in the schools. That's how they celebrate it. You can start turning in Matthew chapter 8. That'll be our anchor passage for the day. In Japan, they split up in two ways. So on March 3rd, the girls celebrate Children's Day, and on March 5th, the boys celebrate Children's Day. The way the girls do it is their houses are decorated with dolls and plum blossoms, plus they drink amazaki. Am I pronouncing that wrong? For any of our Asian listeners out there, I apologize. I do know that it's made of fermented rice, and I don't know what that would ever taste like. But I'm just going to trust that it's delicious if you do it once a year. Or maybe it's not that delicious if you don't do it once a year. The boys, on their day, they fly card streamers outside, and they put samurai dolls on display. That seems to be very boyish. The girls do the flowers, and the boys do the swords. That doesn't mean that's what it has to be, but that's what they do. And they eat chimaki, which are rice dumplings. Now, I like dumplings in general. Now, the U.S. has had an interesting way of doing Children's Day, okay? It preceded Mother's and Father's Day in history, but it was never really celebrated the way Mother's and Father's Day is celebrated because it was never given one specific day. Different states tried to. In 1994, Hawaii legislature passed the first Sunday in October to be Children's Day. And then in 1997, they made it the whole month. So those kids were really happy. But that was just Hawaii. In 1998, Bill Clinton received a letter from a 6-year-old asking to please make Children's Day a national holiday. I'm going to assume he was from Hawaii, came to the land and was like, what's going on? I need more gifts. So today we're going to celebrate Children's Day. And just so you know, parents, the teachers are telling the kids in Kingdom Kid that they should be expecting gifts because you guys are being taught about, no, that's not happening. No, but there's a lot of differences between children and adults, right? You would agree there's a lot of differences between size and a bunch of different things like that. I believe the biggest difference between kids and grown-ups isn't paying bills. I don't think that's the biggest difference, although it's a big one. I don't think it's driving a car. I didn't put that there. The person had it already. Now, what you have to use your imagination to figure out is what does riding dirty mean for a baby? Probably means something that smells. So I don't think it's that. And I don't even really think that it's wisdom or knowledge necessarily that really separates adults from children. I don't think it's money or experience. I believe the biggest difference is who learns from who. I think in time, that has been the biggest difference, and we're going to observe that today. Because think about it, when was the last time that you asked a child for advice on a 401k? It probably didn't happen, right? You probably weren't asking children weeks ago, or if you were in dire need, how to get out of debt. That's probably not what you were doing. But I think that if we did, or if we at least tried to learn from kids, we'd learn more than we think. The title of today's lesson is Childish versus Childlike. Childish versus childlike. And we're going to look at a text here in Matthew chapter 18. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the phrase childlike faith or childlike heart. Yeah, that's something that's said a lot, especially in Christian community. That's nowhere in the Bible, necessarily, that exact phrase. The principle is, and we'll look at that, but that phrase in and of itself isn't in the Bible. What we're going to look at is the principle and what it really means for our lives. In Matthew chapter 18, starting in verse 1, it says, "At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' He called the little child and had him stand among them. And he said, 'I tell you the truth. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me.'" Let's stop there. Jesus' initial response when using children as an example pertains to humility. And we're going to look at that in a second. But he then broadens the spectrum by saying that whoever welcomes the child, period, welcomes him. Now this word welcome comes from the word dikomai. And I'm sure John can correct me on my pronunciation of these words later. But it means to embrace. So when Jesus says whoever welcomes a child is whoever embraces a child. Another definition for it is gives ear to or accepts the teaching and or instruction of. So whoever accepts the teaching and or instruction of a child welcomes Jesus as well. But it's kind of crazy to think though, right? To really, okay, but seriously, do you know where I work? It's all grown-ups. That would be ridiculous if I really accepted the teaching of a child. How does that really apply? Because on one hand we hear that we should be like kids. But on another hand, you have scriptures like 1 Corinthians 13, which tell us to put childish ways behind us, right? And so what we got to do today is figure out, but what are really childish ways? It's about childish versus childlike. It's about understanding what's actually childish, admitting that we act more childish than we like to lead on, even though we are grown-ups, and choosing to become childlike, choosing to learn from children instead of the other way around, understanding it is one of God's principal teachings regarding our lives. Before we dive into the scriptures, though, and really dig up how prevalent being childlike is in the passages, I would like for your mind to be opened about this oxymoron of growing up into a child with a short clip from the TED conference that is aimed at business entrepreneurs. The speaker here, her name is Adora Svita. She is a best-selling author. And she speaks around the U.S. on the topics of leadership and literacy, as well as the topic of learning. And in this particular conference, she was asked to speak on the topic of what adults can learn from children, which is very fitting for the topic of today. So, I think it's also very fitting they chose her because she's 12 years old. Listen to what she has to say.
Now, I want to start with a question. When was the last time you were called childish? For kids like me, being called childish can be a frequent occurrence. Every time we make irrational demands, exhibit irresponsible behavior, or display any other signs of being normal American citizens, we are called childish. Which really bothers me. After all, take a look at these events. Imperialism and colonization, world wars, George W. Bush. Ask yourself, who's responsible? Adults. Now, what have kids done? Well, Anne Frank touched millions with her powerful account of the Holocaust. Ruby Bridges helped to end segregation in the United States. And most recently, Charlie Simpson helped to raise 120,000 pounds for Haiti on his little bike. So as you can see evidenced by such examples, age has absolutely nothing to do with it. The traits the word childish addresses are seen so often in adults that we should abolish this age discriminatory word when it comes to criticizing behavior and sources of irrational thinking. Thank you. Then again, who's to say that certain types of irrational thinking aren't exactly what the world needs? Maybe you've had grand plans before, but stopped yourself thinking, that's impossible, or that costs too much, or that won't benefit me. For better or worse, we kids aren't hampered as much when it comes to thinking about reasons why not to do things. Kids can be full of inspiring aspirations and hopeful thinking, like my wish that no one went hungry or that everything were free, kind of utopia. How many of you still dream like that and believe in the possibilities? Sometimes a knowledge of history and the past failures of utopian ideals can be a burden, because you know that if everything were free, then the food stocks would become depleted and scarce and lead to chaos. On the other hand, we kids still dream about perfection. And that's a good thing, because in order to make anything a reality, you have to dream about it first.
Wow. Yeah, she's pretty smart. We could probably learn a lot just from her specifically. But how impressive is that? And how clearly does she explain the differences and what one can learn from the other? Now, just so you know, the George W. Bush comment, that's not like a New York City Church of Christ supported statement. That just happened to be in the video, so I don't want anyone to feel bad about that. That has nothing to do with this. But as we turn back to our text, I think it's important to ask, how did we get here? Okay, how did the disciples get to a point where a child was setting the bar? And how did we get to a point where a 12-year-old makes us feel bad about our vocabulary? It's the question they ask. Who will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? It is more than a showing of pride. See, because when you see the words here that say kingdom of heaven in Matthew 18, it's easy to assume that all they care about is their position once they die and reach heaven, and how will they be acknowledged before God and the angels. But 4 times this question is asked in the Gospels. 4 times. And all 4 times, the question is asked after Jesus tells them he's going to be betrayed and killed. That is the first thing they think about or ask all 4 times. The last being during the Last Supper. Now, Matthew 18 is the only passage that includes the word kingdom of heaven. None of the other ones include that. All the other ones just say that they want to know who's going to be the greatest, period. And what they're really asking, what they really want to know is, here on earth, Jesus, when you die, who's going to inherit the crowds? Who's going to be leading this group? Who's going to get the attention, the praise? And they want the answer now. On one of the scriptures it says that they come upon Jesus, like they roll up on him, like, hey, we need some answers. What a terrible time to ask that question, though. But we don't struggle with that, right? We don't struggle with that. We don't struggle with wanting a little praise, or wanting a little attention, or trying to figure out how we can advance in our companies at times, maybe, sometimes at the expense of others. That's never a struggle of ours, right? We never deal with something like that. No. Their question, though, has many nuances that